Welcome into the Coaching Clubhouse with Adrian Last.
Hello, I'm Adrian Last, and this is your regular catch-up on the world of coaching as we hear from a special guest here in the Coaching Clubhouse. Now, in the early days of this podcast series, I welcomed an award-winning script writer and business coach, and I'm very pleased to say that he's returned for a second conversation. Must have done something right. Glen McCoy is the author of numerous coaching books, including Guerrilla Coaching, his own take on how to coach effectively, and as the writer of many screenplays and TV dramas, he's here to tell us how the two worlds are colliding and merging. Glen, welcome back to the Coaching Clubhouse.
Adrian, good to be back.
Now, last time you were here, we were talking about your hugely successful coaching book, Guerrilla Coaching, and your thoughts on how best to work with coachees. You're now writing screenplays full-time after many successful years of business coaching. What inspired the transition?
Well, dare I say it was coaching, because a few years ago, I was working with somebody who had a really big goal and we were discussing it. And then she flipped the question and she said to me, was there anything in my life that I have always wanted to achieve apart from perhaps coaching? And I said, well, I've always had a hankering for screenwriting, and I've done various bits for TV over the years. I've done the odd screenplay. And we had this conversation and we went on to her situation again. After that interaction, I did think about it and I thought to myself, there's something here for me, because when she mentioned, what about you, not having a coach at the time, I thought to myself, there's something I need to follow up. And I used some self-coaching to admit to myself that I had to bring that back into my being, if you like. And I started to get back into writing. And then in recent times, I have really telescoped the whole thing now towards writing, albeit I do still have some coaching clients.
Okay. And how did the sort of first script commission come about?
So going back in time, yes, the way I kind of got into writing and going back in time, and this is partly based on something I'm now moving into in screenwriting. I remember very clearly that I had an agent and I rang her up and I just said, I've got an idea that I'd like you to put forward. And she said, what's it for? And I said, well, it's for a book. And she said, well, we don't do books, we do TV scripts. So that threw me a little bit. And I thought, well, I've never written a TV script before. But I left it to her, and remarkably 2 weeks later she rang me up and she said, I've got a commission for 2 episodes of a TV show on the BBC. And I said, well, in fact I just thought it was rather amusing. I said, well, I've never written a TV script in my life. She said, well, this is a huge opportunity. And I thought, well, it is an opportunity, but how do you write a TV script? I've done a book. And then she also told me how much I was going to get paid, and I thought, well, okay, let's give this a go. And I was expecting at any moment the BBC to ring up and say, sorry, I think we made a mistake. Who are you again? And they never did. I wrote these couple of scripts, sent them off through my agent. The BBC read them. They said, thank you very much. We'll link you now with the script editor, blah, blah. And the whole thing went through, and then suddenly there it is on TV. Now, this, of course, wouldn't happen today. This was a long time ago. And I realized that the thing that got me to write the script out of my head, having never written one, was having watched lots of television and movies, and I was writing instinctively. It was like a gut feeling of what I thought it should be like.
Okay.
And unfortunately, it was a really bad thing, because I continued to write that way for several years until I realized I need to learn how to write. And yet I was still getting commissioned, and I was trying to rationalize, okay, so I've never been on any kind of writing course. How is it that I'm getting commissioned where people have been on all sorts of writing courses and listened to gurus and are not getting anything at all. They still haven't been commissioned, not even once. And this brings you back really to the present, in that I've realized that there is something fundamental that a lot of screenwriters are missing completely. And this is now what I'm kind of moving forward towards. And I think we've already discussed this on a previous conversation. It's called movie screen code.
Okay. And tell us more about that concept, because it's interesting that I find it fascinating actually that you've been successful in screenwriting, and then you've got to this point where you've got movie screen code, and actually this is something that could potentially be useful for others, right? What is it exactly, and how does it work?
Yes. So let me give you an analogy. Imagine that you're buying a house and you go into a few houses. I'm sure most people have gone through this. You go into some houses and on paper, they look great, but you know you're never going to live there. You don't know why. It just doesn't feel right. And then suddenly you'll go to another house, and then suddenly you'll walk into a house and go, wow, this is amazing. You haven't even seen the house yet. You've just gone into the hallway, but there's a sudden rush, there's a feeling. And then as you walk through all the rooms, even some rooms may look pretty horrendous and need decorating, you kind of dismiss it and go, no, this is the house I want to live in. And it's the same with watching a movie. There are many movies you'll start watching and probably not want to watch anymore, or you'll watch it under sufferance and think, I really wish I hadn't watched that entire movie. We all know that. And yet there are movies that you weren't expecting to watch, and particularly where the subject's concerned, you think, well, I wouldn't normally watch this, but it starts, you're in the hallway, and suddenly there's this rush, this feeling of, gosh, there's something about this. And then you explore other scenes and other acts, and finally you've watched the entire movie and absolutely love it. Now, it doesn't matter whether you are a screenwriter or not. The fact is, this applies to anyone and everyone when they watch a movie or a TV show. There's a gut feeling, there's an intuitive quality that you either align with or you don't. And I have discovered, I say I've discovered, maybe a lot of people have discovered it, but never taken any further. I've discovered that when I watch a really good movie and I separate it, I can take that movie to most people and say, I recommend it. They will watch it and they'll go, great movie. And I'm now doing this more and more and more, where actually I've got several friends who say, tell me what the next thing I need to watch, because they know everything that I'm recommending, they like.
Okay.
Yeah. Now I have to say, not every single thing, but I would say I'm very confident. So I'm going to do it right now. Okay. Yeah. Have you seen a movie called Whiplash?
Yes, I have. Years ago.
Right. Okay. Did you like it?
I did, because I found it was unusual and it was unexpected in terms of where the story went. Yes.
So I know that I can recommend that to almost anyone and they will like it. The thing is, if they're not screenwriters, they don't know why they like it. And in fact, there are some screenwriters who haven't looked deeply into it and go, I'm not quite sure why, but it was just good.
Yeah,
it was obviously the script. Well, yeah, the script had something to do with it, but there were other elements. There was the acting, there was a setting, and the story, and so on. So what I've kind of realized is, if you take a movie like Whiplash, you can codify the entire movie on a sheet of paper. And what I've done is I found a way of codifying it. And when I then codify it and I look at it, I then realize that it has highs and lows in a curious way, that if I wanted to write a similar genre movie, I could use the movie script code of Whiplash and then layer in my own ideas, and my own story. And there's a very good chance that someone's going to read my script and go, oh, I don't know why, I quite like this. And so the highs and lows, if you like, are a bit like a piece of music. So, for example, you can listen. I'm not a musician, but I can imagine a musician listening to a piece of music, and that will inspire him or her to go and write something of a similar nature, which is entirely their own work, but they've been inspired by listening to this piece of music, which they're trying to emulate in some way.
Yeah, yeah.
So using the movie screen code of any great movie isn't copying the movie, but it's copying the architecture of the house you're walking into.
Yeah, yeah.
And that is, and it's that architecture, that look and feel, that suddenly is positively influencing you on how to structure. And I think this is really important because over the decades, I've been to so many gurus, some of whom contradict each other. So one says this direction, one says that direction.
Yeah.
And you never quite know which one, who is right. And it's very confusing. And also they tend to center on a particular idea where they're only giving you the kitchen of the house. They're not giving the entire house. So it can be very confusing.
And can this be used for, have you tried, well, I suppose you've tried this, but can you take that kind of Whiplash example, or certainly the codifying of how that film is put together and screenwritten? Have you tried putting it into practice? Where has it worked, and can you apply it to any movie or kind of script?
Yes. Now, I haven't used the entire code for Whiplash. However, what I have done with Whiplash is I've codified the first 4 minutes, and because I was struggling for how do I start this movie, and then I thought of Whiplash, and I thought actually the way that opens, the first 4 minutes really does get you interested. It's a good hook, and so using that code, I've used it for something I've been writing recently, but just the beginning. And no surprise to me, I then asked someone to read it, and they go, "Oh, I like the opening," and I had to smile because I think, well, actually, it's the structure that is tried and tested. Whiplash budget was 3.5 million. It made at least 20 million, and successful movie. Now, I would never use the code of an unsuccessful movie. As much as I think, oh, I quite like that, I always check how successful was this movie. Yeah. And if it wasn't that successful, I'm going to stay away from the code completely.
And presumably because we're in an age of television where actually so many TV dramas look and feel like movies, this can be equally applied to television, right?
Yes, it can absolutely. With the exception, I would say, well, is there an exception? I was going to say, with the exception of something like a soap, would you want to code a soap episode? I suppose you would if you're writing a soap episode with a very, very similar theme and idea, potentially. But certainly TV drama, yes. If you were to look at a TV series and look at episode 1, and you were to say to yourself, episode 1 was just extraordinary, it really got me going. Yes, you could codify it, and then using that structure, start to plot your own storyline, characters, and so on. Yeah.
I remember as part of my job at ITV Studios years ago, reading the script for Bodyguard, the very famous global success from Jed Mercurio.
Yes.
And I mean, I don't know, because you're the expert in how this kind of movie screen code works, but that would feel, from what you've described, like a success that you could emulate and put through this kind of codifying system, because literally you're straight in.
Yes.
And you were hooked. I was hooked straight away.
Yes, that first episode was amazing, because now this is the interesting part. If you were to go on a screenwriting or a TV writing course, the chances are whoever's running it would say that the way that first episode was written was not how you're supposed to write, because that whole train sequence was very long. And I can imagine someone reading a script saying, no, this is too long. This is never going to work. Yeah. And this is where the movie screen code comes in, because you're basing it on something that has a proven track record. So if you were to write something of a similar genre, and you were to have quite an elongated scene, provided your scene had that hook quality, you would get away with it. In fact, I think people would go, God, that was so good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I've often wondered since why more writers don't follow that way of writing, because actually, surely as a viewer, you want to get straight into the action. I mean, not always, I suppose, but maybe it's my own personal preference. I like getting straight into the action. That certainly does.
And you're so right, because I saw a movie the other day, which I looked at it as a screenplay, and it ticks all the boxes in that it had this bit, that bit, the 3-act structure, and so on and so forth. However, I really disliked it. It didn't have a heart. So it was structurally a good house, but I would never want to live in it.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I was very disappointed.
Now,
and really, sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, I was going to say, and that's the whole point of this, that you could read books on screenwriting, you could go and listen to gurus on screenwriting, and you can follow their path, but discover that for some reason people don't like your work.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, well, what am I missing? What you're missing perhaps is basing it on theory rather than practice and proven track record.
Okay. A movie screen code, it's part of an end-to-end sort of system for screenwriters. Tell us more about that. Tell us how that whole piece works. So
what I'm developing now, and I'm obviously very excited about it, the idea that movie screen code is a major part of helping people to write for television or the movies with very little background knowledge. So it just makes it very plain and ordinary. And in the book I'm now writing on the subject, I've made it very clear that I am not a script guru. I don't see myself as one, and I would never see myself as one. I would just see myself as a very standard writer whose eyes have only been opened in the last few years, where I've been going down the same track as millions of people, thinking that I've got to read this book on. I mean, there's some great books on writing out there, and I think people should read them. However, if you're constantly thinking, I'm looking for the secret and I haven't quite got there yet, and I'm waiting for that next thing that comes out, telling me that it's actually 5-act structure, it's not 3, it's 5, all that kind of stuff, you can end up actually getting nothing written. But I'm going to say to you, Adrian, if you have a favorite movie and you were to decode it and then you were to recode it with your content, you won't need to know anything about acts or structures or climaxes. It would just suddenly start to flow.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying it's going to be one you can a script you can sell for $1 million or anything, but you will have a script which is workable and it'll start to look professional.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite movies, Glenn, is Airplane, the 1980s comedy classic.
Right.
I'm not sure we can codify that, but
well, you could if you were going to do a similar genre.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we are here in the Coaching Clubhouse, so we should kind of bring the link back into coaching at this point. But I suppose back to the answer to the first question, which is, how do the two worlds collide to a certain extent? What are the coaching tips that you would have for screenwriters who are, I don't know, struggling to complete a script or to get their project produced?
Well, the first thing is maybe they need a coach, and not necessarily somebody who's a screenwriter, but coaching is such a fantastic way of honing your skills and abilities that you were born with. And I notice that when I've coached people who are writers, I'm not coaching them on writing skills. What I'm coaching them on are things like how many hours they write during the week, how to avoid procrastination, how they can deal with that little voice in their head saying, you're not a real writer, you're messing about. All of those things are so relevant to screenwriters and writers of any description. And as a coach, with your coaching skills, you can really help writers. Very few of them who go to a coach, a lot of them go to gurus. And I think that's a mistake. You need somebody who can help you in a holistic way to write regularly.
Yeah. So could I, as a coach, for example, use my coaching skills for screenwriters?
Yes,
Even
totally.
Even though I don't know anything about screenwriting.
Absolutely. Because we all know as coaches that we will get people who want our help from industries that we have no knowledge of whatsoever.
Yeah.
And of course, we can still help them. We don't have to know about the industry or the skill. 90% of it are their personal skills that need honing and improving.
Sure. And what about you, Glenn, in terms of your career at the moment? Are you mostly screenwriting? Are you doing a bit of coaching? And I suppose the question is, as a renowned coach, what are you seeing about the coaching world and the world that we love, of course, at the moment?
Yes. Well, guerrilla coaching is heresy, basically, coaching heresy, because to me, coaching today is another word for counseling, except you get to charge more money, perhaps. I don't know. But to me, that is not what pure coaching is about. Pure coaching comes from the sports fields in the US in the 1930s, 40s, 50s even, where coaching comes from the word co-achiever.
Okay.
And it's been abbreviated to coach. And therefore, a true coach is a co-achiever where 50% is giving people your knowledge and 50% is helping that person use their skills and knowledge. And you come together, you co-achieve, and you get that person to become better than you ever were.
Yeah.
That's coaching. And to me, that's what guerrilla coaching is, getting back to the basics.
Yeah.
And movie screen code is guerrilla coaching, if you like, for screenwriters, because we don't go into all the technicalities. We just know this works, use it as a template, and then start writing.
Very interesting. For screenwriters who are listening, who might be listening, might have discovered this podcast and want to get in touch and want to find out more about movie screen code, or anybody that just wants to talk to you about coaching and the world of coaching from your perspective, how do they get in touch, Glenn?
So quite simply, glenn@glenmccoy.com.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Well, look, we've run out of time, sadly, Glenn, but thank you again for joining me again here in the Coaching Clubhouse. It's always a delight to have you here, and always interesting perspectives. And I hope movie screen code and what you're doing in the world of screenwriting continues to go from strength to strength.
Thank you, Adrian. Thanks very much.
Thanks again to Glen McCoy for joining me in today's Coaching Clubhouse. I'll be back in a few weeks' time with another special guest here in the Clubhouse. Remember to hit subscribe to be notified when new episodes are released, and there's other important stuff to talk about. But for the moment, thanks for listening, and see you very soon.
The Coaching Clubhouse is produced by Adrian Last Coaching. Discover more on the website at adrianlast.co.uk.